Welcome to season 6 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. My name is Melissa Moore, the Retail Advisor and Rethink Retail's top retail expert for 2024. Each week, I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers and brands to dispel the myths, share knowledge and give you an insight into the retail industry. You can listen back to previous Retail Tea Break podcast episodes on your favourite podcast platform or, of course, on YouTube. And while you're there, please do subscribe to the podcast so that you get to listen to it first every week. So in the meantime, grab that cup of tea, sit back and listen in to season 6 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. Today, I'm joined by a guest who has spent over 30 years in the retail industry, having worked all over the world with leading sports and footwear brands, including Addias, New Balance and Under Armour. He specialises in global brand management. From redefining operational processes to increase profits, to building high performance and highly engaged teams, today's guest really understands the customer experience. This strategic global leader has made a name for himself, driving growth and innovation whilst transforming the retail landscape. Bob Neille, retail and brand maestro, welcome to the Retail Tea Break podcast.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks for having me on your tea break, and I'm having a tea break myself. And a massive hello to all those listeners and watchers of your channel. So happy to be here.
I'm delighted to have you, Bob, because again, as I said there, the experience and knowledge you hold absolutely excites me, and I can't wait to dig into that. But look, in the age-old fashion of the Retail Tea Break podcast, even though you've got your cup of tea in front of you, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, which I'm told is about 2 minutes, tell us a little bit more about you and your background in this industry.
Yeah, sure. It's really interesting because I think when you meet people in retail, people arrive in retail, and that's obviously a very broad topic for lots and lots of different reasons. But my entry point is through product design. I studied product design. I was very passionate about product design, still am. And the thing is, when you have one of your products in store and then you watch people interact or not interact with your product, for me, that started to get me interested in how do I get human beings to do something? I pick up my product and buy my product. And I sort of then ended up on this journey of, I suppose, more consumer behavior, storytelling, getting human beings to do something. I know that sounds very sort of like very vague, but I think retail as a subject is also so multifaceted. It's very hard just to put that into one bracketed term. And as you know, through our conversations, I really dislike the word retail. I don't know what to call it. But I'm globally active in retail, but retail, it means to take something large, cut it up into small pieces, and sell it for a profit. And I think very much today more than ever, I don't know what to call it, but retail is so much more than that and has to be so much more than that. But hopefully that was less than 2 minutes. But my entry point was watching people walk past products that I'd sweated blood over, to then getting into the whole mechanics of human behavior and storytelling. And I typically say to people that that's what I do, is I tell a story, and that story engages people with brand and product. And that's how you generate great brand engagement and sell through ultimately. So hopefully that was less than 2 minutes.
I love that, Bob. And actually, that's what really excited me the very first time we spoke, is you turned around and you said, yeah, I don't like the word retail. And I think my jaw hit the floor and I was like, great, that's every listener switching off and every viewer just going, what's she done this time? But actually, when you explained it like you have there, you've stripped this right back. It's the product, which every single person listening has multiples of, even if they're a product-based company selling D2C. It's about how you get the shopper, so me walking down that high street or coming onto the internet, picking that product that is yours and making it their own, which actually is exactly what we're all trying to do. So in that respect, what does good, and I'm almost going to put retail in air quotes here, what does good retail look like then to Bob Neille?
I think that I don't want to just reference some environments. I mean, we all know those environments. I'll have to use the word retail because I'm not sure of another good word, way to describe it. But we all have those brands, those businesses we just love to go along and spend time in, and sort of almost lose ourselves in that brand and what that brand stands for. But I think a key thing to great retail, and it's amazing the amount of companies and brands that really miss this, is they don't put the consumer at the center. They don't focus on the consumer and where and how that consumer wants to shop or interact with you as a brand and a business. So many companies still put their own operational process and structure at the forefront, and that's ignoring the customer at your peril. So for me, brands out there, businesses out there that focus on the consumer and that consumer experience are where you really get that cut through and point of difference. But a lot of those disruptor brands, and some of those can be in quite traditional segments. I mean, you think the way Tesla started to sell cars, it was no longer that big out of town car lot. Nespresso, goes from, from English people aren't necessarily the best when it comes to coffee culture. It's still the builder's tea in that sort of dirty spoon cafe, which I love, by the way. But Nespresso moving into that sort of almost jewel-like engagement with people, it goes so far beyond just the purchase of a product. Dyson, again, you think some of the electrical retailers here in the UK, and it's funny being here in the UK now for 9-10 months, I'm catching up with a lot of the brands and businesses that are no longer here. But the way you would traditionally buy a vacuum cleaner versus the way, as an example, Dyson present a vacuum cleaner. I mean, that's just an elevation of the product, but really connecting through with those consumer wants and desires. It's no longer something in the 50s that the husband buys for the wife at Christmas. It's something which actually does become a very functional, but a thing of beauty, but answers consumers' needs and wants. And so it's consumer centricity. Wherever you get that, wherever you get a brand or retailer using that, that's where I strongly believe you see great retail.
And I agree, because actually, and look, I'm not a coffee drinker, as anyone that listens to this podcast knows. I'm purely a tea drinker. I know Nespresso, of course I do. And it seems to bring that essence of luxury for that
Yeah,
moment, for that ritual of you making your coffee in the morning. My husband's definitely a coffee drinker, and I see him do that on his way out to work every
yeah,
day. It's that essence, it's that luxury, it's living in that moment, which
yeah.
actually, as you just said, that brand is selling you. They're not selling you a cup of coffee that you
Mm,
could buy in a jar and add a bit of hot water to. Likewise with Dyson there. And again, I'm going to say we are Dyson owners in this house. And it's a very different way of
yeah,
buying into a brand, because again, you're buying into that lifestyle, like you are with Apple, like
yeah,
you are with a lot of the athleisure wear brands. It's adding value to that shopper's life experience.
yeah,
And it's almost harmonizing the brand with their values and their mission and the shopper, and bringing them on what feels like a lifelong journey. Like, I
yeah,
don't know anyone that has ever owned an espresso machine that's just had one coffee and gone, not for me, thanks. That can sit there, or I'm going to gift it to someone else. Same with a Dyson. It does
yeah,
feel like once you buy into these brands, you're kind of with them for life.
yeah. And I think that's really important, because something, when you have conversations with people that are in retail, it's almost like people look at retail as isolated, siloed activities. There's retail operations and there's retail marketing, and never the two shall meet. Whereas for me, I believe we've got to look at process and operational efficiency. So, do we have the right products in the right place at the right time based on consumer wants and needs? And at the same time, emotional engagement. And I've seen time and time again is that sometimes, it can quite often happen where the company's so focused on one aspect, they forget about that 360 view. And the reality is, you can have a great retail concept, you can have some great process or logistics and supply chain, but you've got retail in the wrong place, your real estate strategy is not right, or there's pieces missing. So, a conversation I had as recent as last Thursday, the only way I could describe it was that you have to look at things like you're a conductor of an orchestra, and the person I was having a conversation with, I just turned around and I said, that's like making the guy that plays the trumpet or the trumpet section lead the whole thing. I said, they have their place to play, but it's never going to work. It will seem to work in isolation, but there's no longevity with that. So process operational efficiency with emotional engagement, I think, is really important. And I think if anything coming out of COVID, I think that's something that we as human beings, and I think that's the important part, we're human beings, and human beings, we learned through COVID, human beings love to be with other human beings. We enjoy companionship, we enjoy storytelling, we enjoy sharing. So I think that's been an interesting perspective when it comes to omni-channel, direct to consumer, that blend of online, offline, physicality, virtual reality. But it's very, again, very much, we've got to make sure we focus on the consumer. Where do they want to interact with us, and how do they want to interact with us, and what's the best way for us to get our brand, our story, our mission, vision, all those things, and ultimately the product into that person's hand at the time that makes sense for them. And we have to be comfortable with the fact that people can come into your stores, look at something, and then purchase online. And again, you still have those instances where a store manager's losing sales because they have a fulfillment role, pick up in store and things like that. So again, we as human beings, I think, have a lot of evolution to attend to, and evolution is far more cost efficient than revolution. But we've got to make sure change is the only constant. Evolution, revolution, we've got to continually move and look to the future all the time.
I laughed there when you talked about the store manager. It reminds me of a story just from last week. I was in a flagship store, chatting away to store manager. Store looked incredible, but he was really down. And I was like, what's wrong? May's been quite strong for an awful lot of people out there. And he's like, yeah, May is strong, but it's not as strong as they want it to be. And when I pulled apart this conversation,
Yeah,
that was the issue. That obviously, look, they're a very customer driven brand. They're a very, very customer led store. They're able, with the tasking that they do, to actually chat to the customer and spend the time with the customer, which is
yeah,
amazing. And actually what he's seeing more and more is that that's exactly what you said, Bob, that customers are coming in, they're physically touching the product, they're looking at it, they're exploring it, and then they're going home to buy it online. No, they're
yeah,
still buying from the brand, but in his brain as a store manager of this
yeah,
flagship store, he's losing money. And that's actually being fueled by the conversations having above him. Actually, why aren't customers buying from you? So he's been told he has to try and ensure people buy
yeah,
from him when they come in. However, at the end of the day, the brand is still succeeding in getting shoppers to buy from them across the board, across their
yeah,
channels. But he's been almost bashed by people above him
yeah,
saying, no, you must make them buy from you. So I understand, and I know there are people listening to this as store managers going, but it isn't fair. Why are we being
yeah,
told one thing? Bob's saying another here. That isn't it great that actually, as a brand, we're
yeah,
serving the customer in their channel? It feels like things are still a bit disjointed. We're talking about omni-channel. We're talking about serving the customer in the many ways across any channel. But actually, when it's coming to bog standard retail
yeah.
bricks and mortar, store managers still getting scolded for not selling enough.
Yeah, and I would, and it's such an interesting topic, and it would vary very much by the brand and the business, and some are more advanced in this than others. But I think even just it's a very internal looking way of saying
Mm.
channel. you know, Bob, you're head of wholesale. Bob, you're head of full price or outlet. Again, it's putting artificial silos and barriers onto something which the consumer doesn't see. So again, consumer centricity, you have to look at everything through that lens of the consumer. And by sort of heart goes out to those store managers that get bashed over the head, or maybe have limited product in their stock room and find themselves needing to fulfill some online orders, and actually literally giving away to another channel that they don't get commercial credit for, and then losing the ability to have that product in their physical store. So again, that holistic view, process and operational efficiency, that consumer centric view, is so important. But again, that's where retail would be a more traditional way of calling that and looking at that. But retail, the time you'd go to the local hardware store, and you'd be able to do so many things there, and it would be a family owned business. They would get things off the shelf for you, and the sort of the shopkeeper would have known your parents, your grandparents, and probably back beyond there. For me, that is it's old school, but it's also retail. But I also think it talks a lot about the future, that consumer centricity, understanding, knowing the consumer, knowing you and your family, knowing the things you like, the things you don't like. So again, Confucius said something along the lines of, consider the past and you'll see the future. And I think, that's a really interesting way to look at it, is that, we shouldn't overlook what we as human beings need to thrive, and how do we engage with that as a business and as a brand, because when you do, it really makes a difference to your business.
I absolutely agree. And I think more and more people are leading from the front with this. The good retailers that we see out there are starting to really make it a shopper journey. It isn't just about selling goods. It is that longevity, which, as you
Yeah,
said there, it is about generational retail now. It is about having that customer from a teenager, or,
yeah,
a homeowner at start, and moving with them throughout their life.
yeah.
But coming back on something you said there, and I'm mindful as well that you've held such incredible positions across the globe with big brands. How do you get people out of those silos? So look, if you're trying to get the stock in the right place at the right time, and God, we all know that phrase, but actually in reality, it's rubbish. How do you get people that are outside that frontline position, who aren't necessarily meeting that customer every day, whether it's online and your omni-channel experience or whether it's in store? How do you get them to buy into the fact that what they're doing, for the good or the bad, has an enormous impact on that shopper, and whether they
Yeah.
buy today or whether they go to your competition?
Again, a really interesting point. Yeah, it's not necessarily a straightforward answer, but for me, again, human interaction is so important. And you see organizations out there where C-suite or executive leadership, they sit there in head office, wherever that may be in the world, and they don't actually go out into retail and see the reality, or the reality for them, retail wise, physical retail wise, is maybe an easy distance from the head office. So
Mm.
quite often you'll see almost like this ink spot of like really cool looking, well invested retail around the head office. And then you have quarterly business reviews and things where you talk about your consumer muse, and yeah, we're meeting that consumer and blah blah blah. And but the biggest thing I see is that you have to be out in stores. You have to be spending time with country management, with regional management, with store managers, and temporary summer staff. You have to spend time with these individuals, because that's the quickest way you're going to really learn and understand what is happening to your business. To sit there and look at a spreadsheet, it can be very misleading. And one of my experiences was to, the main board had this very strong view that our consumer was this young consumer. I'm trying to be careful in how I use my words, but the reality is that the number one store was a 10-year-old factory outlet where people were buying at a discount. So you've got to then understand, what does your brand actually mean to people? Where are people buying your product, and what does that product mean to those individuals? So again, if you sit there in headquarters and you go to stores within a handful of miles to that store, you're going to get this artificial vision and impression of your brand and who's buying. And it's very easy for country regional management to present numbers at quarterly business reviews with some curated photographs. But as a leader, if you actually get out there and look, it's a little bit like, the emperor's new clothes. You suddenly actually what you're presenting to me is not the reality of what's happening in your market or region. So I think, long answer, but I think the answer to that is that great leadership is about actually understanding all levels of your team, and listening. You've got two ears to listen and one mouth. So there's a reason for that. And the amount of instances I've had where people turn around and go, "We've never had anyone from head office come here," and they're so pleased for that engagement. So being out in market, incredibly important. It doesn't matter whether you've got a national role, a regional role, or a global role. you have to be in market. And that will then mean you have that rounded understanding of how you need to look at your business, rather than sitting in, your ivory palace and looking at how the business is structured. That's how silos, channel strategies and things come in. You definitely need channel strategies, but you have to have that understanding that the consumer moves very fluidly through all that. And disengagement through a store manager thinking he's going to lose a sale that could be accredited to him otherwise is something that great leadership is about, making sure that thought, that feeling is removed, so the whole company's pushing in one direction, which is ultimately going to provide greater success.
It's so refreshing to hear someone that's sat at your level across global brands to say that, Bob, that, being in store, meeting with the people who meet your customers every single day has been important to you. And obviously, the teams you've led, it's become important to them because it's the way you've driven and you've led the business. And it's wonderful to hear that, because I think the more that happens, the more change or even organizational change will be easier to accept, but also that shows you're listening, which, as you said there, is hugely important. From everything you've done over those last kind of 30 years, and I know we've mentioned some of it there, getting out onto the shop floor,
Yeah.
is there anything else on your list of, I suppose, even non-negotiable basics that you feel that either brands or retail teams should be doing?
I think it's really truly understanding your brand's place in the market. What do you stand for? What's your unique perspective? What is your story? And I think it's really important to make sure that you beat your own, you beat a drum to your own path. Is that the saying? That you're true to who you are, and you focus on who you are, and you don't try and be someone else. And again, it's quite amazing that the brands that are out there almost try to emulate the market leaders, as opposed to turning around and saying, right, what are our core truths? Where have we come from? What are our unique points of difference? And that doesn't matter whether you're a brand that has some significant history, or even if you're a fairly new startup. I mean, in all instances, you have to be aware of your uniqueness. Why are you here? What is that value proposition? Why should somebody engage with me? In today's world, with the time pressure on everybody, you're after somebody, spending some of their valuable time with you, online, physical, wherever that may be. So what is that? And I think if you are true to who you are, and you know who you are, and you play to those strengths, it makes it very hard for others to compete. And I think the other thing that's really important is that today's world, it's very competitive. There's pressure on sort of generating more sales, generating more revenue to the bottom line. So I think in terms of ourselves as leaders, we have to provide value across the business. Being able to plug ourselves into an organization in ways that brings maximum value rapidly. But I think also agility, and not necessarily politically correct, but the world today it's about guerrilla warfare. It's being unexpected. It's maximizing what resources you have. The days of putting your hand up for more budget have long gone. So how do you really maximize the budgets you have? How do you turn up in unexpected ways? How do you add that sort of delight to consumers? But being true to who you are and truly knowing who you are and what you're about is really, I believe, the key. And we talk about retail's not dead. Bad retail is dead, and those that are succeeding are stepping beyond what would have been viewed as traditional retail, functional retail. So that's about combining process and operational efficiency with that emotional engagement. We as human beings want that emotional engagement, and you can't forget that as a business, because that will ultimately drive strong top line, and your process and operational efficiency will then deliver a robust bottom line.
I think it also then frames everything that's done on a day to day. I've certainly been talking about that a lot in the classroom over the last few weeks, that there has to be a reason for you to do
Yeah.
what you do. And you have to share that with everyone that comes in the door, that wears your uniform, that wears your name badge, that people need to know there's a reason for them to be part of the journey as well,
Yeah.
which kind of leads me into an interesting one. And again, I know you've worked with some incredible legacy brands as well as some much newer ones. The idea of utilizing brand story to
Yeah,
build, or supposed to build upon that emotional connection with that customer. And I suppose, again, can drive loyalty, some would say, and
yeah.
keep them coming back. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the importance of that kind of brand story and getting it out there.
Yeah, yeah. I'll use an example. New Balance, a brand that I love immensely. Some incredible people there doing some great work. And when you have brands that have that sort of history, that positive legacy, it provides such an awesome foundation. But again, there's an understanding of things being cyclical, that that people in an organization come and go. So sometimes you have a loss of an understanding of why and who you are as a brand and as a business. And when I joined New Balance, I was super excited. Some great people. The business was struggling, and when you looked at it, I think we were at the time really quite preoccupied with wanting to be the number one performance sports footwear brand, for running, available in widths. And that's a very functional view and perspective, but it lost the essence of who New Balance was and what New Balance was all about. And there's such an incredible story there. And so as part of this sort of overall business review, which again, sort of storytelling sounds quite sort of non-business, but actually the story is the core, it's the nucleus of your business. But to then discover New Balance, again, why are they called New Balance? Well, William Riley, an Irish immigrant, found himself in Boston, noticed chickens in his backyard walking with perfect balance with their three toes. He then created arch supports, which actually were selling, for the same price as the leather shoes people were buying, but it helped people move better. It gave the sort of the support in the shoes that people needed that have overall benefit to the body. So in essence, right from 1906, when New Balance was founded, or I think it was the New Arch Support Company, they were about helping people move better, and that impacts your life. And from there, Arthur Hall was the first salesman, and he went round in his car, do your feet hurt, back problems, you need arch supports. But then, William Riley then went to the Brown Bag Harriers and said, I will make you some running shoes that will enable you to move faster. If you don't, you won't have to buy them. And he created a shoe that was wider, allowed for the foot geometries and everything. And those guys found they were able to run quicker and better with the shoes from there. And that was the foundation of New Balance. So by focusing on your story, you then found yourself really able to give that point of differentiation. And to think that you started in 1906, and when you look at other competitor brands, immediately things start to fall in place, and suddenly customers get, these are experts. They've been around since 1906, and therefore it gives you the perception and the reality of, these guys are footwear specialists. They know my feet. They know comfort. They know performance. And as you see with everything that New Balance does now as well, incredible style, awesome products, and just great people. But so lucky to have been able to work with the great people there at New Balance, Jim Davis, Chris Davis, some awesome people still doing some incredible work.
It's the perfect example, I think, Bob, of how legacy and a brand story just brings everything bang up to date. Because as you say, me walking into a store today, I'll know now, having heard that story, that they do understand what they're doing, that they
Yeah,
actually are mindful and looking after me as a shopper,
yeah,
that my performance then will be better in whatever I do. And
yeah,
I think it links it together, which therefore drives loyalty. Again, I buy my first pair today. They're obviously going to do what it says in the tin because they've
yeah,
been doing it for over 100 years.
yeah,
And then that's going to drive me to buy another pair in the future and probably share that story with others. So it's a
yeah.
lovely way, I think, to bring something very traditional right up to date for today's retail. And with that, then, because I've got to ask you this question while I have you, where on earth do you think we're going with this? What do you think the future of retail looks like? Do you think we'll continue with those gorgeous stories like New Balance and just them bringing everything up to date, whether it's them, different brand with new tech and innovation, or actually do you think we're going to really embed ourselves now in very traditional values of just being customer centric?
I, if I could give a one sentence answer to that, then yeah, I would be a billionaire. It's obviously a multifaceted answer that's really needed for that. I think something that's really important is getting back to core values. What do human beings want? Service, being consumer centric is so important. That's why when you look at sort of retail from the 40s and 30s and things, those shopkeepers, you need that level of consumer centricity, being able to have customized product, or you have your jeans altered or whatever else, that level of service, almost like a concierge type of approach. I think that also provides a lot of mental stability for us all in a time of there's a lot of turbulence being going on now. Seems to have been going on for years, but there's a lot of turbulence. So I think that reassurance, you can go there, there's a brand, a brand you can trust. There's people there that you can relate to, that you're part of that tribe, I think is important. For me, I'm conscious, I don't want to come across like some sort of like Luddite. I am very, very sort of focused on the future and technology. And there's a whole load of things that I've been working in with regards to virtual retail and the gamification of the business of retail, from product innovation through to reviewing retail data. But I think it's really dangerous to think that tech is the answer. Tech is an enabler, but we shouldn't lose sight of what is important for human beings and use these other things as a way of enhancing that experience. Being able to see a shoe on your foot with your phone is obviously awesome, and that can be part of that consumer journey. But ultimately, a human being with something like a shoe needs to have it on their foot so they can really experience it. So I would say, don't lose sight of what matters to human beings, who your customers are, what matters to them, and where do those things matter on that customer journey, and use technology, because tech can be pretty expensive. Make sure you use technology in a way that enhances that and brings value to that, but somehow doesn't. There is no magic bullet to that. Human interaction, I believe, more than ever, for the foreseeable future, is what we need. And again, I said earlier, COVID illustrated that. But let's see. I mean, the great thing about retail is that there's all sorts of subjective, objective, retail metrics, storytelling. There's so many facets that go to make great retail that you can't pick one out in isolation. So again, process, operational efficiency, emotional engagement. If you keep your eyes across those three broader buckets, then you will have a successful retail business. Even though I hate the word retail, and I'd love to hear from anybody via LinkedIn or wherever. Maybe I should post something to say, well, if we don't call it retail, what should we call it? Because I find myself sort of just questioning, and I feel if we could come up with an alternative descriptor, that could be the future. But I'd answers on a postcard, maybe.
Oh, definitely. There's a call to action for people listening. That's a fascinating one because, you're definitely not comfortable using that word retail. And I'm quite mindful of it with this conversation as well, but for the right reasons as well. So I do think maybe we could change it. Maybe we could have a new word. So if you can think of anything, do let us know. But look, final question. What's coming up for you, I suppose, for the rest of the year? Where are you going? What are you doing?
The thing I've loved about my journey, and all those incredible people I'm connected with on LinkedIn, all those incredible people professionally, personally through my life, people connected with me professionally that become like family. They know that I'm on this journey that has twists and turns, and I've never, Melissa, I've never sort of really sat there and said, right, in 2 years' time, I will be, or I'm going to do. And so what I am really, really excited about and enjoying so much is conversations like this, is the conversations I'm having with a whole host of brands and people out there. But so I'm conscious my wife can hear this, but I'm not quite sure what the next 6 months will hold. All I do know is it's going to be pretty exciting. Where in the world we'll end up living, yeah, again, that's going to depend. I enjoy working with interesting people, founders, interesting brands, but the journey I'm on, I'm just loving. So maybe we should have a follow up in 6 months to see where Bob's at, and maybe by that time I'm sort of working something very functional just to generate a bit of housekeeping money.
Oh, but I think that's so exciting because, as we said at the start, you've over 30 years experience with enormous, massive global brands. And I think the experience and the knowledge that you bring is unbelievable. So I actually love the fact that you're probably going to help even more people over the next 6 months, wherever that might be in the world. And how lucky are they in that respect? So I'm excited to see what you do next,
Could
following you very closely on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, maybe we'll have to do part two now next year and see where Bob's at next.
I also just want to you sort of said over 30 years. I'm conscious I do have some gray hair. I'm sort of not I'm not near to the end of my life. I have a lot of experience, a lot of energy, and a lot of passions. So yeah, so in my mind, I'm still a lot younger than maybe my face portrays, but love meeting people, opportunities, and yeah, I'd love to hear from the people out there in the retail tea break world and people on LinkedIn, and yeah, interesting people. I can't get enough of them. So let's have more conversations.
And I think that's key here. Keep these retailing, and again, I'm going to put that in quotation marks, keep these retail conversations going. Well, look, if you've enjoyed today's retail podcast episode, please do like and share it. And as Bob said there, do connect with him on LinkedIn. I'm going to pop his details in the show notes. Remember, you can find those show notes and the transcript for today's episode on theretailadvisor.ie. And as this is the last episode of season 6, remember you can listen back to all past Retail Tea Break episodes on your favorite podcast platform, or of course on YouTube. And then we're back in the autumn with our 3rd anniversary and season 7. But for today, Bob, Neville, thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Absolute pleasure, and it's been a great retail tea break. And I best get on with some real work and trying to work out what the future of retail is going to look like. So, really appreciate you hosting me, and been a lot of fun. And look forward to chatting again soon.